Welcome everyone to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
That specific event, June 13th, Iran's direct military strike on Israeli territory.
Yeah.
And the information points to this being the first overt attack launched by Iran itself from its soil onto Israeli soil in decades. They framed it publicly clearly as retaliation.
Retaliation for earlier Israeli strikes on their military and, crucially, on reportedly nuclear-related infrastructure.
And that framing, as you said, that's key. It highlights the change because, like we mentioned, Iran's strategy for so long was those proxies.
Right. It let them project power, harass Israel, build influence across the region, but without, creating that direct casus belli, without risking a direct state-to-state war with Israel or, importantly, the U.S.
It was about pressure, but also limiting their own direct risk.
Exactly. Calculated pressure.
But something obviously shifted their calculation. The reports suggest Israel strikes, particularly those in April, then again in June, one reportedly near Isfahan, that sensitive area.
Home to nuclear facilities, yes.
That seems to be what Iran's leadership saw as crossing a new line, an unacceptable red line. It wasn't just hitting proxies anymore.
Right. It was hitting targets seen as central to their strategic capabilities. Maybe even, in their view, hitting sovereign territory or core interests. That perception, it seems, was the critical factor.
So, opting for direct retaliation, launching missiles, drones from Iran itself, that's a high-risk move for Tehran. It breaks the old model.
Definitely high risk. So what might be the motivations? Based on the analysis out there, a few things seem possible. First, a clear signal on deterrence.
A message.
A strong message, basically saying we won't just absorb these kinds of perceived unprovoked acts of aggression anymore, not without a direct response.
And you can't ignore the domestic picture either, can you? I mean, amidst their own challenges, economic problems, unrest, legitimacy questions, taking a strong, direct stand against Israel. It's a classic move, really.
It absolutely could be part of it. And it ties into what some analysts are calling an attempt to establish a new deterrent framework.
New set of rules.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Trying to force a new understanding. You hit us directly, we hit you directly. That's a major recalibration of risk for both sides.
And the attack itself, the nature of it, also telling. Reports indicate multiple waves, ballistic missiles, drones, aimed specifically at military intelligence sites deep inside Israel.
And significantly, the Negev Nuclear Research Center near Dimona was mentioned as a target.
Right. Now, Israeli Defense's Arrow, David Sling, help from partners. They intercepted most of them, the vast majority.
Sure.
But the fact that some reportedly got through, caused some damage, that definitely underscored a vulnerability and, raised public anxiety inside Israel quite a bit.
That's a crucial point, the psychological impact, showing that even sophisticated defenses aren't foolproof. It changes that sense of security fundamentally.
Yeah, which brings us straight to Israel's side. How are they dealing with this? What tough questions does this direct response from Iran pose for them?
Yeah, it's a big challenge for them.
Israel's core strategy, stated for years, is preventing Iran from getting nukes. They've said they'd act, even risk escalation, to stop that.
It's central to their doctrine.
And they justified their recent strikes as, necessary preemption, citing Iran's uranium enrichment getting close to weapons grade, targeting sites linked to nuclear or missile programs.
But Iran's direct response has definitely forced a rethink in Israel's leadership, the defense establishment. They frame their strikes as self-defense, but analysts are asking, did they underestimate Iran's threshold?
Right. Did they miscalculate how Iran would react to direct hits on key infrastructure inside Iran?
That's one question. Another is about international backing. Did Israel maybe overestimate how much support they'd get or for how long for actions seen by some as escalatory strikes inside Iran?
Because global powers condemn Iranian attacks, sure, but they're often less unified on supporting strikes on Iran.
Exactly. And we're seeing reports of domestic political fallout in Israel, too. Opposition figures, some security analysts apparently voicing concerns, worries about being drawn into a wider war without a clear endgame.
This direct exchange has really sharpened that internal debate.
Absolutely. And you cannot talk about Israel's challenges without mentioning the other huge factor, the risk of a multi-front conflict.
Oh yeah, the northern border.
Tensions there with Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran's most powerful proxy, have been incredibly high. readiness is way up. This direct confrontation with Iran itself just adds this incredibly complex, dangerous layer on top of that already volatile situation.
It's not just one adversary anymore, potentially.
No, that Modi front threat, direct Iranian strikes, plus Hezbollah, maybe others, it presents Israel with a much tougher deterrence puzzle than before.
So stepping back a bit, how is the wider region, the world, reacting to this sudden shift, this direct confrontation?
Well, across the Middle East, the information suggests kind of a mix. A lot of official silence, publicly, but underneath, significant concern. And maybe some quiet support, depending on who you're talking about.
Particularly anxiety in the Gulf countries.
Right, yeah.
Right, especially those normalizing ties with Israel, like the UAE, Bahrain, or Saudi Arabia considering it.
Oh, deep anxiety. They really worry about getting dragged into a wider conflict. So publicly, you hear calls for maximum restraint, warnings against destabilization.
But privately?
Privately, it seems, many still want to see Iran's influence curbed, its nuclear program contained. But the risk of Iranian retaliation, either directly or via proxies in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, that makes them extremely cautious about any public alignment that makes them a target.
Understandable. And the global response. Also navigating carefully, it seems.
Very carefully. The U.S., Israel's closest ally, is walking a tightrope, affirming Israel's right to self-defense, providing aid during the attack, but also reportedly urging restraint on both sides, publicly saying they don't seek war with Iran. Behind the scenes, you have to assume intense diplomacy pushing de-escalation.
And U.S. forces in the region are on high alert.
Definitely. Acknowledging the increased risk.
And other players. Russia, China.
They've reportedly criticized the Israeli strikes, called for diplomacy, reflecting their own complex ties and interests. European powers, expressing deep concern, warning more military action could kill off any chance of reviving diplomacy.
Like the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA.
Exactly. This whole incident puts enormous strain on those already fragile diplomatic paths.
It really underscores how everything connects back to what many see as the absolute core driver here. Iran's nuclear program.
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
Israel sees a nuclear Iran as an existential threat, a red line. Iran insists his program is peaceful, civilian energy.
And those recent Israeli strikes, they reportedly hit facilities involved in high-level enrichment, maybe missile integration, activities potentially linkable to a future weapons program.
That's why sites near Isfahan, Natanz, are so sensitive, so volatile.
Iran did confirm some damage, though they stressed no nuclear material was compromised. But still, this direct exchange, it amplifies a major fear.
That Iran might now use this, the perceived need for stronger deterrence, to actually accelerate its nuclear program in retaliation.
Exactly. That move, getting closer to breakout capability, that would almost certainly provoke more action from Israel, maybe bigger action, possibly even from the U.S.
And the state of diplomacy on the nuclear issue is, well, pretty bleak, isn't it?
It really is. Formal talks, like Vienna, stalled ages ago. Trust between Tehran and the West, virtually non-existent.
So many observers now think diplomacy alone might not be enough anymore to contain this or stop Iran pursuing weapons if it decides to.
It feels like both sides are hardening their positions publicly, which could mean we're entering a really dangerous phase of nuclear brinkmanship.
Pushing things closer to the edge, without necessarily wanting war but risking it.
With a very high risk of miscalculation. That's the core danger. Unintended, larger-scale conflict.
So looking at this trajectory, what started as primarily an Israeli effort to prevent Iran's nuclear capability through covert means, proxies, has now spiraled into this new phase, direct, overt confrontation.
Yeah.
Neither side seems to want a full regional war, but this exchange, it's undeniably brought the region closer to direct interstate conflict between these two powers than we've seen in recent memory.
And that risk of miscalculation is so high because, well, reliable communication channels between them are basically absent. Add the domestic political pressures we talked about in Tehran and Jerusalem.
It increases the risk dramatically.
Yeah.
Each retaliation, each attempt to set a new deterrence level could just spin out of control.
Unforeseen consequences.
And we absolutely cannot forget the impact on civilians across the region. In Israel, Iran, potentially neighboring countries, living under this constant heightened threat now.
That's right. I think the main takeaway from this whole shift is pretty stark. That old assumption that the conflict would stay confined to proxy wars, covert ops.
Yeah.
That's been shattered. open, direct confrontation between Iran and Israel. It's now part of the equation, part of the dynamic. And that just brings a level of unpredictability, of danger that this specific rivalry hasn't really faced before.
It really feels like a new, unstable equilibrium. The old rules just don't seem to apply anymore.
And the new rules are being written basically through action and reaction, often with incredibly dangerous consequences.
So without significant diplomatic intervention, maybe from regional powers, international players.
This cycle of mutual retaliation, you cross my line, I cross yours, it could just become this prolonged destructive pattern, further destabilizing an already incredibly volatile region. It's a very precarious moment.
This new era then, direct confrontation born from years of tension, recent escalations, it's profoundly significant.
It really is, and it leaves us and you listening with a critical, maybe provocative question to think about. In this new reality, this new paradigm where direct state-on-state strikes are clearly on the table, what does deterrence actually mean now for both Iran and Israel? And maybe more worryingly, how likely is it that their attempts to establish this new, more direct deterrence could actually inadvertently lead them and the whole region towards the very huge conflict that everyone publicly insists they want to avoid?
Something essential for you to consider as events keep unfolding, a deeply challenging prospect. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into this new era of confrontation.